this is the voice of Sailor.
I am Dhalbaby, and I love this movie. I love it. One of my favorites.
I'm Alvarez, and I love this movie too. I hated it as a kid, and it was one of those ones that grew on me as I got older, and it's just great. So I love it.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you all for joining me for this very special inaugural episode of the Canon. I'm excited to go on this journey with you all. I'm excited to have you guys here. Before we jump into the movie and conversation on that, I did have a question for you all because we all write for Screen Age Wasteland. I'm sort of newer to the bunch. I've only been contributing for about a year and a half, maybe. And I think you guys have all been around a bit longer. I want to say from the inception. So I was wondering if any of you guys could just walk us through sort of how Screen Age Wasteland came to be.
Oh Lord.
Is this a long story?
I can give you the brass tacks of it all.
Yeah, can you be brief, Sailor?
I can try.
No, he can't.
Oh my God.
We started off in the comments section of another website. I don't know if we want to say the name of that website. A very famous movie website, and they got rid of their comment section. They went to Facebook comments, and we all kind of felt spread out into the ethers of the internet. And I don't know exactly who started it, but somebody started another website deep in what was it?
Channel.
In a Discuss channel, and then they found me somehow, and then so we started off before Screen Age Wasteland. There was a Discuss channel, and then we branched off from that into another channel that I am having a hard time. What was it called?
You mean the old website?
Yeah.
Film
Exodus.
Yeah.
We had Film Exodus for a little bit, and then complications arose, and then we had to ditch that site, trying to be
we started from scratch.
We started from scratch for the third time, and now we are here at Screen Age Wasteland.
And surprisingly, we've been around for almost 4 years now.
I know, that's crazy, right?
Nice.
This is held pretty strong.
Third time is a charm.
Time's
there you go.
We've lost some major players. I mean, when we started out, I think there were 7 of us that I don't know. I guess you'd call owners. We bought into the website or whatever, and how many of us are there now? 4.
About
Yeah, I think there's 4. Yeah, 4 core, and then but we've added in 10 other writers now. So
yeah, but of the originals,
yeah,
Sailor kind of flew right past this, but I mean, we created the site because we wanted to stick together as a community, as a community of commenters. We enjoyed, BSing with one another, and so that's how we got those Discuss channels. It was. I remember that day. It was me and another guy from the comment section, and we built this channel out and started grabbing all the guys and gals, I guess. Because basically what happened was when they killed the comments, you couldn't find anybody. You didn't even know where they were at. So we just traced them through other comments. And so anyway, that grew into creating an actual site where we all started contributing. So it's just really just for the love of film. And I guess that's kept it going.
Nice. I love it. I mean, having a community of people who love and adore films and have similar senses of humor and sensibilities and all that stuff is that's what most of us are looking for. I've really enjoyed my time contributing to Screen Age Wasteland, getting to know some of the other contributors, and now getting to do this podcast with all of you guys, to just continue to sort of like grow a community and continue to talk about movies and why we love them, and also just get to BS a little bit. So fun stuff all around. And there's no like hard deadlines or like anything like that, like specific word counts that you have to hit. It's cool. It's fun.
I mean, you should have known. You should have known Duke like 3 years ago. My God, talk about getting pressured and pestered.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Tight ship.
Yeah, to his credit, I make fun of him, but Duke in a lot of ways has been the glue. He keeps the news going. He kind of keeps us organized. Yeah, I got to give that guy credit. Yeah.
I built the site.
Like the actual website itself.
Yeah, like I got the once we figured out the name, because we were going back and forth on it. Once we got the name, I put down got the domain and started building out the pages and trying to figure things out, like trying to get the layout, and it's WordPress, so I mean it's templates. Don't get me wrong, it's
still tough.
It was a process. It was a process because we sat for like 6 months before, right? Almost. No, it was like.
No, I don't think so.
It was like, yeah, because I think June was our first official like post, but I was putzing around with it from like February on. So it was a good 4 months before we like launched officially. Like I was trying to get stuff from the old site, trying to like find things to be like, oh, let's figure out what we're gonna like start with and get some articles and posts and grab some of my old reviews and things like that. So
good.
Dhalbaby's wife came up with the name.
I partially have heard that story. I heard that she came up with it. You guys were sort of like in between a few other names, or maybe leaning towards one, and then Dhalbaby's wife was like, what about Screen Age Wasteland? Which is, I gotta say, like a fucking awesome name.
We do. We like it. It ended up being the obviously the winner, but like we had a couple of good front runners.
We had a million ideas. Oh my God.
And this one came up and I was like, yeah, that works. That's it. Like it was a no-brainer. Like we all heard it and we were like, everything else is out the goddamn window. It didn't matter.
No, it's amazing. Like when I tell my friends and stuff, the name of the site, like most of their reactions are the same. Like, oh, that's an awesome name. It really like it just it clicks. It makes sense. It's like very distinct. It sticks in your brain. All that good stuff. I don't know if Dahl, I don't know if your wife is in marketing, but it seems like a bit of marketing gold that she struck.
She's not. We were both English majors, but she's got a knack for coming up with names. She loves that kind of thing. So I'll tell her, I'll pass on your compliments and it'll inflate her ego.
So the name I was pushing for was Marshmallow Ghost, and that rock didn't go anywhere up the hill. So
yeah, that one doesn't really do it for me.
I mean, it ain't no Screen Age Wasteland. When I heard it, I gave up on Marshmallow Ghost immediately. Sometimes when you strike gold, you stop digging. It's right
Marshmallow
there.
Ghost sounds like a Twitch streamer.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, a successful one.
Someone who's yeah. Someone just wrecking 14-year-old kids in Fortnite every Tuesday and Thursday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Twitch.
You just described a success story.
Yeah.
And that could have been us destroying 12-year-olds.
Yeah. In another lifetime, maybe.
In another lifetime. And please don't isolate that audio, because I feel like you could do something horrible with that audio. All right, moving on to Blade Runner.
Yeah. Moving on to Blade Runner, the topic of today's episode. I guess it's worth noting that we're kicking off things with Blade Runner because in April, Screen Age Wasteland is celebrating 100 years of Warner Bros. So we wanted to start off the show with a couple of movies, that were distributed by the Warner Bros. Studio. So we of course decided to start with Blade Runner because it's freaking awesome, and I'm sure between the four of us we could talk about this movie for 3 hours, probably longer. We're gonna try to hold the conversation a little bit under 3 hours, but yeah, I think we can jump into it. To start off, I think a good place for us to start, I just want to get a sense of like everyone's sort of personal history with the movie. Like if you remember the first time you saw it, if you've always loved this movie, if it was something that you didn't click with automatically and it sort of took a few rewatches or some time to really love it. If everyone could just start there. Maybe Alvarez, you could go first.
All right, so I think the first time I saw it, I might have had the chicken pox. No, I saw it before that. I was gonna say I got them late in life, so I was like 13 or something. So it was one of those things where I was like, no, I got them in high school. I was even older, so I definitely saw it before that. But I think it was during that same time that I saw like one version, then heard about I saw the director's cut, had heard about the theatrical cut, and I was like, what's the difference? And that kind of like got me going, because I was like, well, theatrical cut was fine. I didn't think it was great. I thought it was slow and kind of, boring, as a kid. And then I was a little older and watched that and found, I think, the theatrical cut somewhere and watched that, and I was like, all right, that was a little bit better. Like something about it like clicked more, and then it really kind of like had me like hooked, where I was like, I dig this world, I dig this plot, this whole concept, and I was like, all right, I'm in. And I just kind of started like reading more about it and trying to find details and get more info about it, and that's where I was like, I got enthused by the actual like filmmaking process part of it. It was like how much stuff was going on the back end, how much Ridley Scott didn't really know the source material, things like that. You're like, oh wow. So like it just became like a very interesting movie to me more than anything, about the whole process. So I think that's where it was one of those things where like I got suckered in, fast.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty reasonable sort of arc for someone to go through with this movie in particular. Sailor, what about you?
Oh my goodness gracious. It took me probably 5 years to finish this movie the first time. Like because I would get to the process, not the processing scene, the enhance. That scene, which feels like it's 5 hours in real time. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. Whatever he's looking for that he's trying to enhance on in this crime scene or whatever, I'm like, I don't care. I just do not give a shit. Where are the robots? Like, I didn't even get the replicants for like, I wanted more robots and shit. Like, I wanted it to look like Heavy Metal Magazine. I'm like, that's what androids and robots were to me. So I'm like, I don't even see the point of this. Like, I just didn't care. I'm not the biggest fan of Harrison Ford. I know that's sacrilege to a lot of people. Outside of Han Solo and Indiana Jones, I think he is a bore of a movie star, to be honest with you. And I still, now that I appreciate it for what it is, Blade Runner, I still don't think he's that good in it. But once I keyed into Rutger Hauer's character, and I saw that what replicants, the tragedy of the replicant story is far more interesting to me than this noir procedural where he's trying to hunt these replicants down and all. I'm like, I don't care about anything involving Harrison Ford in this movie. I just don't. I don't care. But every time they cut back to the replicants, it's such a tragic story because their deficiency, the entire way that we find out whether or not a replicant is a replicant or not is through empathy. That's the test that he's performing, and that's how we can determine it. And I'm like, that's such an interesting concept that their deficiency is something that we put into them. We design them to not have empathy. Now, what happens if those replicants who have extended their life, or at least are trying to, and they're getting to that end and they want to live? Are they alive? Do they deserve life, even though they're not real? But what is life? And that question, those questions, and that theme really sucked me in a way. And it really did. It really was the second one, which again we'll talk about later, that made me appreciate this more than I did the first couple of times. And we'll get into the reasons why it's really, really hard to love this movie. Because it's a math problem. You have to figure out which fucking version. Any movie that makes you do math before you watch it, it's not an easy movie to like. It really isn't. But we'll talk about all that later. I'm going to toss it to Dahlgren because I know he loves this thing.
Yeah, my story is not dissimilar from Alvarez. My dad liked sci-fi and stuff like that a lot when I was a kid. So we lived in a small town, and my aunt lived in a neighboring small town. She ran a video store, and we would, go over there and bum movies from her and just keep them as long as we wanted. And it was either one of her copies or maybe he even bought it. I can't remember, but Blade Runner was always laying around. And, I don't remember ever really sitting down and like watching it as a kid, but I just remember it being on and really similar to Alvarez, just thinking, wow, this is really boring and dull and depressing. And where's the action? Where's the robots and lasers and whatever? And but I guess those seeds were planted, and as I got older, got a little more curious. I think I ended up with his tape copy of it somehow. Popped it in the VCR probably either as a teenager or early 20s. I can't remember. And that was just a new experience for me. It was different from all the other times I'd tried to watch it. And I guess just being a little more mature, I could appreciate what was going on kind of underneath all the visual imagery. And honestly, really very similar to you, Alvarez. I just got more and more curious. Okay, what's this about? What are the stories behind it? I've read a lot there is to find on Blade Runner, just even in like books and stuff, just because I'm just that curious about the making of it and what it all means. I've read the novel, didn't like it. And I think just the older I got, the more I lived with the movie, the more I grew to just love it. It became kind of it went from a curiosity to something that I really love. I ended up getting to see a screening of it at the Draft House maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and got to finally see it on the big screen. So
wait, that's cool. Awesome. How was that?
It was amazing. Yeah, it was. I saw it.
It's like a cold beer in hand, and you're watching Blade Runner on the big screen. That sounds delightful.
Yeah, I think it was to mark the anniversary of the what was it? When was it set? 2019? Was that the date?
Yeah.
I think it was to mark that, and so it was
quick thing on 2019. This movie takes place in November of 2019, and rewatching it before this recording, and I was just thinking, a few months after that, Harrison Ford's Deckard had to deal with all of the fallout from COVID. I just wonder how he. I wonder what Deckard's pandemic lockdown was like.
That was probably the least of his problems, man.
It was in the desert in Vegas,
He was already quarantining, so didn't make a difference to him.
I didn't think
cut
to go.
You off.
No, it's all good. I didn't think to go look this up, but I did a write up for that screening. It's on the site. I want to. It was probably November 2019. That makes the most sense. But yeah, it was amazing.
Didn't we do a whole month for that?
We did. Yeah, we did. Much to Sailor's chagrin.
We did. We dedicated a whole month to this movie.
Yeah.
The fuck. A whole ass month to this?
Whole ass.
My goodness, y'all.
We don't half-ass anything.
Only whole ass people around here.
It's funny too because you said that you saw it for the 2019 screening, and I went and saw when it came out, when they did the final cut, definitive edition, whatever they call it. I don't know. I had at my old job years ago when this happened, coworker of mine, he did movie reviews, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to go to screening of Blade Runner?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And we went like 2 blocks from the office, went and saw it. Digital, fantastic looking film. Like I was just like, "This is awesome," right? I'm in this super cushy seat, blah 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 blah. And then my girlfriend at the time knew how much I liked the movie. She bought me tickets to go see it at this place called the Music Box. And it's this old school theater. It's got the old seats, the whole 9 yards. And like, it's a completely different experience because it's a film projection. And I was like, all right, I was like, I'll go. And I didn't let her know that I had just seen it because I felt kind of bad. And we get there, we go to the theater. I'm in these hard ass old seats, which they're really great. But when you're in a long movie, like 2 movies I've seen there were this and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and just like you're there forever, like your ass hurts. And I happened to be sitting right over a vent, and it was cold, so the heat was on, and I fell asleep during the movie, and I was just like, I felt so sad. That like she gets me these tickets to go see this movie, and I couldn't tell her that I had just seen it like the day before with a coworker, and fell asleep. I feel like such a heel, but it is what it is. Hence why she's next.
That's amazing. I'm jealous that you guys got to see this movie on the big screen. I feel like it's easier to get just like to like emotionally connect with a movie like Blade Runner if you are seeing it on a massive screen and not just like watching it at home. God forbid someone watches this on like their computer screen or like an iPad. It's just disgusting. Like this needs to be seen on like a massive film projection at an old school movie theater. But I wanted to circle back on something that I think all of you guys sort of touched on, that like this is a movie with like a really, really hard like barrier of entry. Like it's not like very accessible to most audiences, especially depending on what age you are when you first watch it. Like this is not a movie for like 10-year-old kids to watch. Like barely, I think I first saw this movie when I was like 16, and even at that age I was like, I don't really get it. But then, tried again at 23 or whatever, and then tried again at like 30, and each passing screening you're kind of like, oh, I sort of understand this movie more. I think it does like take like a certain kind of maturity to be able to connect with whatever is going on here. But the other thing that you guys sort of all mentioned that I think is pretty important, and we should probably just get this out of the way now. What's the deal with all the cuts? Like, which one are we supposed to watch? is I assume the final cut is the definitive version. I don't know which ones I have and haven't seen. If anyone knows like the differences between the different cuts, please explain. I'm just going to lay that all out there.
Well, I can tell you the differences, but we're going to be here all night. There's 7 different cuts of this damn movie. 5 official, but there are 7 different cuts. There's an international cut. There's a work print prototype. There was a sneak preview cut, a theatrical cut, a final cut. The U.S. broadcast had a different cut. It really comes down to how much bullshit is Ridley Scott putting into the movie to convince you that Deckard is a replicant. That's really the biggest difference. And the color grading, because sometimes this looks really blue, sometimes it looks really green, and then sometimes it looks kind of brown. So depending on what color you're looking at and if there's a unicorn in it, stay away from that version. Anything that has a unicorn in it, get it the fuck out of here. It's not good. It's no good. Because 2 of the main problems with this movie, and then because this is going to speak, I mean, because in order to talk about the differences in the things is Ridley Scott doesn't understand his own movie. I mean, I don't think that's a controversial statement to make. He does not understand his own movie because he wants you to believe that Deckard is a replicant, and he's wrong. You're wrong. I'll say it to his face. He's wrong, 100%. So any version that
say it right now. Say Ridley Scott, if you're listening, you're wrong.
I was even going to go even further, but let's say, yeah, Ridley Scott, you're wrong, and Gladiator 2 is going to be a fucking giant mess. What's wrong with you? So I think the final version, is that the one that's the definitive version? Because even that, I get confused on which one is the definitive version.
Final Cut's the final version.
And that's the one without the unicorn shit in it, right?
I don't think so. I watched I'm pretty sure the version that I watched was final, and there's at least one cutaway to a unicorn running through the forest.
Yeah. I know that there was the original. Originally it was the you had the theatrical. Let's narrow it down: theatrical and director's cut. And director's cut didn't have the narration. It didn't have the
Oh god, I forgot about that narration.
Didn't have the unicorn. I think he added that. So that's where it's weird. But like one had narration, one didn't. That was like the biggest thing that I knew of back in the day. And the whole unicorn stuff, because I know that was actually wasn't it taken from Legend, I think?
Yeah.
Wow. The different versions, and I'm like, yeah, I was like, it gets very, very complicated. Like one's got like a little extra footage, one has the narration, the work print's a little bit longer. He said like the international version has like a few different scenes and something else. The final cut, they reshot scenes, so that stuff with what's her name? Joanna. Oh my god, I'm blanking on her name.
The Snake Lady?
Yes.
I don't know her name, but yeah, she's the Snake Lady.
I'm blanking on her last name right now. But like that footage of her running through the glass, like he reshot stuff with her at her current age and like superimposed her face. Joanna Cassidy, there you go. Thank you. And extended that sequence and made it look a little bit better. And like there's things like that like I was like, oh, this was worth it. These were, good changes. He tightened some stuff up, but at the same time, I do agree with Sailor. It's like, because I don't like the fact that he thinks that Deckard is a replicant. I feel like that should have not been that case.
Can I chime in here?
Yeah.
I'm on the other side of that fence from you, Alvarez. I think it is the stunt double in the original, is it a man?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, I know it looks a little wonky, but I believe in like preserving things the way they are as much as possible. I mean, I've seen some movies like cleaned up and things, changed that didn't bother me too much, but I don't know. That movie has a place in time, and I think updating it years later it's like George Lucas. He just can't stop. Like he can't deal with the fact that his movie is not perfect. It's dated, or like, let me go back and tinker with the special effects, and I don't know. I don't agree. Leave it alone. Let a lot of times, I like movies more when you can see some of the blemishes, the way that they've aged. And so yeah, I'm on the other side of that. I say leave it alone. Don't be going back later and cleaning up things. Just let it be, man. We love it for a reason, despite or maybe because of its blemishes.
Well, yeah, I don't argue or don't disagree with you on that, but I don't fully agree with it. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's like, I think that the changes were good, but it was funny because I almost brought up Lucas as well, because I hated what he did with A New Hope, and I hated what he did with Jedi.
You mean Star Wars?
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes, Star Wars. Because it is really weird just calling it A New Hope. But I hated what he did with Star Wars. I hated what he did with Return of the Jedi. But I really liked what he did with Empire, and I liked what he did with THX. I thought the improvements on THX made it, feel like a little bit more like grand movie, And I thought that like what Ridley did was minute enough that it was like it's fine. Like it didn't hurt. It didn't add much to it, but it didn't hurt anything.
Mm.
It is also weird because it's like, oh my God, Ridley, how many versions can you have of this? Now, don't get me wrong. The director's cut and the theatrical cut is the studio's fault, 100%. It's them making all these changes and doing things that they thought was going to make it a better movie. But you're right. Don't go back and keep tinkering with it, because all of a sudden it's like, 10 more years down the line, we're going to get the final cut. Like there might be no need for it. And there's things where like Coppola is just as guilty. Like how many versions of Apocalypse Now can we have?
Mm.
And each one is getting longer.
I never really thought about how that makes the movie less accessible for people. I thought you were going to talk about the subject matter, and that's pretty interesting. And yeah, you guys are all right. I mean, like, what version do you watch? I mean, it's pretty ridiculous if you have to go to Google and start asking questions of the internet before you can just watch a movie. And to be really honest with you, I think every time I watch it, I think I go back and reference a site to remember which one that I like. I don't hate any of them. I don't love the voiceover, but yeah, I think I prefer I'm with Sailor. I prefer the one without the unicorn stuff.
I'm gonna jump in real quick and say two things. I cannot believe I forgot about the narration, because it's about as bad of narration as any movie has ever had, and that's including Dark City, with Kiefer Sutherland's take a couple of shots of NyQuil before you record your lines. It's bad. It's really fucking bad. But it's interesting that we're using all of these other directors as reference points when Ridley Scott does this shit all the time, but usually to great effect, because his director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven is a radically different movie. Like, if you watch the theatrical version of that movie, I can understand why you don't like that movie. You watch the director's cut, you're like, oh, this is a totally different movie. And he has director's cuts of multiple movies like Alien and American Gangster and The Counselor. That's a much better cut. So he has a great track record of tinkering with his movies. It's just interesting to me that his biggest one, well, one of his biggest ones, is the one he keeps going back to and just fundamentally misunderstands. Like, he just doesn't get it. Which is
Can we talk about that for a minute?
Oh, absolutely.
Actually, I can hold on to this, Raph, until you ask us for our recommendations, because it'll probably be a little more relevant then.
Okay, that works.
Yeah.
I was just still on this topic of which cut.
We didn't give you an answer.
No. I think honestly, I love the discussion that that you guys are having. I think it's super interesting, and it's impossible to talk about this movie without getting into all of the different cuts and sort of what that means for, us as viewers, our understanding for it. Because, if two people are talking about Blade Runner and one person is like, oh, I think this about Blade Runner, and the second person is like, well, I think that about Blade Runner, they could be talking about two like pretty different movies that they saw. Like one person could be talking about the theatrical cut, which is like essentially a different movie from what the final cut is. So like their ability to have like a conversation about the movie isn't synced at all. So I think it is like super important. I think this is my last question. Does anyone know if the theatrical cut is still available anywhere? I'm pretty sure every time I've tried to watch this, at least like on streaming or anything, it's only been the final cut.
You're streaming wise, I think you're only going to get the final cut, but there was a box set that came out with the final cut that had final cut, director's cut, and I think it has 5 versions on it. Like
you're talking about the one that came out in that briefcase?
The briefcase, yeah.
Yeah. I had that for a minute.
I have it.
Physical media.
That does sound like an awesome box set. I have the Apocalypse Now one, which is it also has all the different cuts, nice. And like a bunch of extra features. But I was thinking while watching this, like this would be an awesome like Blu-ray to have, like an awesome like steelbook if you do it with all the different cuts plus like the sequel. That would look very nice on a shelf.
Because I think the box set has theatrical, directors. I think it's got a work print, which really does look like a work print. Like, and then final cut, because that's 4. I'm trying to think. Maybe that is the only one. It's been years since I've looked at it. It's one of the.
I think there's an international cut.
There might be. It's one of the few DVDs of mine that I kept that I didn't like get rid of. I sold all my DVDs a while back and digitized everything and moved on.
No, dude, physical media is awesome.
Yes. Keep physical media.
I don't have room for it. Now I do, but I don't need to keep that shit.
Listen, dude, I live in a small New York City apartment, and my girlfriend hates me for it, but I am not giving up my physical media. We need to keep that shit alive.
No, man, because they'll that's the thing is they'll change it and then you can't access the original. I have a DVD set. I don't think I even own a Blu-ray version of this movie. It's a set,
yeah,
and I think it goes all the way up to the directors. I don't think there's a final cut in the set I have. I'd have to go back and dig it out and look. But Raph, what version did you watch just recently?
So I watched this movie twice pretty recently. I watched it a few months ago. Because I've always had a tough time with this movie. Like it's a movie that I like always really want to like. But every time I've watched it, I've always had a difficult time. I sort of like, I understand why so many people adore it so much and, connect with it on really deep levels. Like emotionally, like cinematically, it's an incredible, feat. But it's just never been something that has like clicked for me. So I watched it a few months ago. And I was like, I see the value here, but it's just not for me. And then I watched it again today for this recording, and I think I'm starting to get a little bit closer of like finally starting to click with it. I think it just takes a few watches, but both times I watched the final cut. And yeah, I mean, Sailor, what you were saying about the color grading, this movie is very blue, and I kind of dig it.
Depending on the version you watch, sometimes it's green.
The version that I watched was certainly blue, unless I'm colorblind. But I think that's a cool way for us to segue into sort of just like the look of this movie. So like the way that it's shot, the way that it's lit, and then also like the VFX, which I feel like is another huge thing that you sort of can't really avoid when talking about this movie. So yeah, if you guys just want to go into sort of your thoughts on everything around sort of how this movie is shot and what it's doing with special effects.
Well, it's a fully realized world, right? I mean, that's what's so impressive about it. And I think that's the thing I couldn't really appreciate as a kid, because you don't really think about how things are made. You just take them at face value. Well, that's that, and it looks that way. And you don't think about the workmanship that goes into it. But it's a fully realized world. And from what I can tell, it was a pretty miserable production to work on. Because I think it in a lot of ways it was real. You know, they were filming at night in the cold and the rain. And the look of it is just, it's so interesting and so unlike anything that was out at the time. And I guess that's mostly owed to Sid Mead, the artist, conceptual artist. But yeah, I think that as an adult, I think that's the thing that really started to draw me into the film, and maybe some of the lingering questions, like the way that the film ends and you're just like, wait, what? But the look of it, I mean, I don't know. It's just a movie you can get lost in, even if you don't like the narrative, or don't like what it's about. I think most people can appreciate that it's a movie that you can just kind of almost go live in. It feels that real.
Like the visual effects in there, that like, it just, you don't notice it. Like, it just feels like it's there. Like nothing jumps out. Like there's stuff, and I think like 4K TVs, which they're great, and at the same time I think they're really bad because they pinpoint a lot of flaws more, and they make things that should look good look like they're shot on a video camera. Like there's just something about it, and I'm like, I love and hate it at the same time. And when I watch, Blade Runner on a non 4K TV, it feels right. It feels real. Like things about it, like you get this weird depth, and you still get that on the 4K, but it also just seems almost too crisp, in a weird way. And I'm like, I don't know, but like there's just stuff that happens in there, like kind of going back to how we talked about Lucas, like, yeah, when he filmed his, X-Wings and stuff, you could see that little box around them, which was great. Like I didn't care back as a kid, and I don't care now, but like you only a handful of years later, you see Blade Runner and none of that was there. Like everything felt grounded. And that's the part that was stunning. I mean, it's the cinematography. Like you're right, the story is a little weak. It's a little like all over the place. I don't even say all over the place. It's just a little like messy. And you're like, okay, there's a reason for this. I get why they're doing what they do, but I'm like, the retiring them part kind of it's just like, just have them turn off. Like, I don't understand, like, what you need to have somebody go after them. Like, if you're going to put an end date on them, just have them turn off. It's done. You don't have to hire anybody to do this. But there was clearly something more to it that they were trying to get. And I think that's almost kind of why it failed when it first came out, because people were like, I don't get it,
Oh yeah.
But visually, the fucking movie is stunning. Like it is one of the best looking movies I've ever seen. And I think that's one of the things that made me like it more as I got older. It was just like, I just got really interested. I got into photography. I got into all of this. It's like, I just wanted to how did he do this? And it's like, that's the part that ended up being more interesting to me about the movie than the movie itself. It's the costumes, it's just the set decor, like just using Christ, I'm going to blank on the name of the building, but the building, and it's just, it's so good. It's the set design, it's the locations, everything about it. Crazy to me, because it's just like, wow, you really took the time to do this, but yet you almost kind of didn't take the time to really figure out your story. It's weird. It's hard to talk about it and say something bad about it, yet at the same time say I love it. It's weird.
No, you're 100% right. The problem with this movie is the pace. The story doesn't justify its pace. It has a pace. It's paced like a noir story where it's taking its time. But I'm like, there's no real characters we're setting up in this. A noir is usually always either a character has done something that he can't get out of, like he's sucked in with a honey trap, and now the noose is tightening in on him, and is he going to get out in time? And they never do. It's always the characters dumb enough to think they're smart enough to get out of a situation, but they never do. Or it's a murder mystery. This is neither one of those things. It's not really character heavy. It's not plot heavy. So it's really just watching a character hunt 5 people.
Yeah.
So there's no reason for it to have the pace of a noir story because it's not really a noir story. It wants to be.
But he does get sucked in with the honeypot.
True, but that's so little of the movie that it's.
I know.
It's not, but I mean, but it has all of the earmarks. It has all of the archetypes. It has all of the visual cues, but it doesn't have that noir story, which is why I prefer the story of the second one. I'm not going to keep going back to the second one, but I do love how they complement each other because where that movie has a better story and is much longer, so you can argue that the pace is even worse. But for me, I was enthralled in that because I'm like, I want to see what is the ultimate game of this. Like, what is he trying to unravel? In Blade Runner, it's ultimately, is he going to shoot the guy? That's really what you're waiting for. And then it twists on its head at the end where it's like, well, now I don't want him to shoot the guy because I want him to live. I want him to have that humanity. So it's a story but that's Ridley Scott. He has always been more concerned with style over substance. But this is a movie where the style is the substance.
Yeah.
Where he ladles on so much of the style and he can't drown it. It's because you're more invested in, oh my God, look at that tower. Oh my God, look at this grimy ass alleyway. Oh my God, look at that duck. Like, look at all, because there's a tactile feel to this that so few movies before and very little movies after this have. Because any movie that came out after this is just stealing what this movie did. And it's not to say that this movie started it. It's stealing from Metropolis. But it's doing it in a way that doesn't feel like you're eating your vegetables while watching it. No offense to Metropolis, but that's unfortunately the side effect of watching older black and white silent movies is that you're doing your homework. Like, there's no emotional connection to a movie that you know every actor in it has been dead for 20, 30 years. But Blade Runner is like, oh my God, that's Han Solo. That's Lady Hawk. So there's like a connection to it because it's recent enough that it doesn't feel dated, and it has a pulse. Like, it's a city. Ridley Scott created a world with a pulse. Yeah. Like, you feel like the world continues once the movie is over. Like, these characters are going on to more adventures that we're just not going to see. And that's the strength of this movie. It's not the story. It's not really, I don't want to say the characters, because Roy Batty is one of the best characters in all of cinema. But it's not. But he's not the focal point of the movie.
And now a seamless transition.
Like, I don't know who gets credit from the look of this movie, so I'm just gonna say the cinematographer and Jordan Cronenweth. I'm not 100% sure if that's how you pronounce his name. Jordan Cronenweth. He made a hell of a good-looking movie. This is the best looking movie of the 80s, full stop. Like, as important to the fabric of cinema as the Star Wars movies are, I mean, George Lucas already laid the groundwork in the 70s, so I don't really give them some. I mean, Empire looks completely different than Star Wars. So I'd say this and Empire are like neck and neck, but I would say more movies are taken directly from this movie. Like Batman, there is no Batman. There is no Tim Burton Batman without this movie. Just period. Full stop. So it's either every movie that is cyberpunk adjacent or in a dystopian future that wants to be grounded in some way is taking from this movie. Or they're taking from Batman, which took from this movie. So it's the style of this thing. It's just Ridley Scott knew how to make a beautiful looking world that feels real. And I think that's the overall, more than Roy Batty, which I think is one of the best characters, more than the side characters, which this movie is filled to the brim with great character actors. It's really the look of the movie. And even we were talking about all the different cuts, whether it's oversaturated in greens, blues, or browns, it's still going to look good. Even the unicorn shit that I don't like still looks good. There's no visual in it that I dislike. It's just thematically has no point, so it shouldn't be there. It's not that it doesn't look good. It's every aspect of this movie is just visually is pitch perfect. There's very few movies that can hold a candle. And I don't think we're ever going to get back to this because now everything is CGI and shit. We don't have enough Denis Villeneuve and Christopher Nolan who are fighting for more practical effects and things. So,
well, you're definitely not wrong there. I mean, that has been a big thing too. Like all the CGI, like it's just, I don't know. It's good and it's bad. It's kind of what I was talking about with like the 4K. It's like it's good and it's bad, and it highlights things and makes things look better. But then also at the same time, like there's just sometimes I go into movies, I can't remember which one it was. It was one of the later MCUs where like I got in there and the screen, everything just looked so good. Like I shouldn't say so good, but everything looked so crisp that it almost looked fake. It just looked fake. But then you go and you watch it on a TV that's not 4K, and you're like, oh, okay, it looks fine. Like it looks like the way it should. And then you go and you watch it on 4K, and you're like, I don't know, something still looks off. Like they're so close yet so far with certain things. But then you get movies like, this is completely off topic, but like Monsters, Gareth Evans' first movie, you know, and because everything's so minimal, or like even District 9, like you've got like, right? Is it District 9?
Yeah.
Right? Like the special effects are there, but they're so like minimal and like they're not the forefront of everything that they feel like they fit better. And I'm like, I kind of missed that like type of movie where everything just now becomes everything's 100% on a green screen. Although I saw some behind the scenes stuff of like The Last of Us, and I'm like, damn, like that's a lot of green screen and and it looks good. But in a similar way, how you just said it was short on story, I think I got done with that show and I was like, I'll keep watching it. It looks great. I thought the story was a little weak all through 9 episodes. Like I just kind of was like, it's there. I'm watching it. There was like episodes I thought were fantastic, and then I just kind of was like, okay, it's there. It got done.
I think Blade Runner is a great example of good art is made through struggle.
True.
And you know, and that's not to diminish VFX artists who work at a desk creating these worlds, but Blade Runner was really hard to make. Apocalypse Now was really hard to make. Star Wars, by all accounts, was very hard to make. I'm sure I could list off other examples of movies where, I mean, you know, directors nearly came to blows with actors, or you know, stuff like that. And I don't know. I think that when you can just say to a team of people, hey, go create this, and you know, we're going to call it a day. I just don't think it. I don't think there's enough struggle there, at least not on set. So yeah, I think the harder something is to make, the better chance it has of being something at least real. Maybe that doesn't guarantee that it's going to be good, but
well, it
there's
forces. It forces creatives to come up with a solution that does not involve the money hose. It's the Sam Raimi effect or the Spielberg effect. Jaws, Evil Dead, movies that had no money and they were up against it. And since they are creative and they know what they're doing, they figure it out. Nowadays, it's just the money hose. Uh-oh, we don't know what. Hit it with the money hose. It doesn't matter. Hit it with the money hose.
I don't know how to do this. Do it in post. There you go.
Do it in post. There it is.
But I do want to get back to talking about how much we actually do like this movie. Like, as much as I can sit there and say, like, something is, like, it might be a little short on story, it's still a good story. Like, it's an interesting thing. It's like, okay, it is about, like, who deserves to live. Like, you said it before, Sailor. It's just like, you know, it's like, oh, well, I want him to have that life. And you're like, yeah. Is it right for us to, you know, just cut their life off since we created them and like it's got a bigger like thing to it than you possibly imagine, and it's kind of really hard to put into words. But like, it's like you start thinking about it in different ways every single time you watch it, and I think that's the part that I love about the movie is because it's like you watch it and you're like, cool, it's there, you know, and then you watch it and you're like, oh, and you start seeing things and you start thinking about things differently, and like. That's what I love. I'm like, it's those movies that make you want to revisit them and figure out other, you know, parts, things that are going on. You're like, okay, yeah, they could totally do this. Like I said before, like they could just shut them down, but now you're going after them. And I was like, well, should you go after them? Just kind of let them do their own thing. If like they really want to go somewhere else, just let them go. You know, like, why did it have to be this big struggle? And it's weird.
I think the story is a clothesline in which to hang style and themes. I think there's a lot of good themes in this. And one of which that we didn't talk about is the fact that there will be a generation of people that even if we get to the place where we can leave this planet, there are still people that are going to be stuck here because they don't have enough money to leave. And they don't really make a big deal about it in the movie, but that's definitely there. And it just hammers home the fact that, we just assume that the space age dream is going to be for all of us. And it's not. It's just not. We're not all going to leave this planet. And that's really... that's a huge part of the movie that, again, they don't hammer home, but this is the detritus. This is the trash. This is the people nobody gives a shit about, nobody cares about. And
that's a big focus in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Deckard is right in the middle of this, and it really informs his character. And it informs all the other characters, because it's like, yeah, we're not even good enough to leave. We're stuck here.
And there's a lot of weird things. Like the book goes into a lot more detail about like Deckard's home life, and it goes a little bit more into the animals. They touch upon it in there and being like, oh, the snakeskin being synthetic, but like how crazy it was to actually have a real animal, because it was like very, very rare, very, very like they get into all these details. It's like, yeah, you don't need to know it all, but it's kind of there, and it's like. It's cool and it's weird, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it's funny how the 80s, you know, portray 2019, and here we are now in 2023, and it's like we're past that, and it doesn't feel that much different, even though it is very different than it was in the 80s. You know, like it just doesn't seem like we're never going to get to what Blade Runner looks like in our lifetime ever, you know, like it's just not gonna happen. But it's cool to think about and funny to like think about, you know, in hindsight going, wow, that's what they really thought was gonna happen. You know, I don't know. I find it entertaining.
I mean, they're closer than, now I love movies that are set in the future that is now our past.
Mm-hmm.
Like in 1997, when the world fell, it's like, no, you didn't. No, that didn't happen. No, there's no gasoline wars. No, that didn't happen. But
flying cars, man, it's always flying cars.
I know. Outside of the flying cars, it's not too far off. Honestly, it's
We can't even get self-driving cars right. We're not going to get flying cars.
if we can get our shit together, we probably could have did it.
That's a big what if, though.
I know.
We clearly can't get our shit together. Come on.
True. There's always a bit of a tinge of optimism to any future depicted because it's like we could have robots and shit. We can have Rosie the robot, but
what's worse? What's worse, a reality of social media desolation where everyone's looking at their phones and obsessed with their phones and taking selfies, or Blade Runner? I don't know.
Either way, Blade Runner or our reality, it's a thing. Okay. So something that Sailor, I think you sort of touched on this earlier, but I really want us to circle back on is I think we're all in agreement that the story and the narrative here is sort of light, but it's really just it's just a thing to it's just a place for all of these other things to sort of exist, right? The insane world building that happens without any real like world building, like the world building is just like the movie existing, and we all sort of understand that this world of Blade Runner is like something that is very lived in between, shot to shot. Like outside of the movie itself, there is so much going on within this world, and like just from the 2 hours that we watch, we sort of understand everything that's going on there. It's also a vehicle for a lot of different themes to be explored. I think you could have 5 different people watch this movie and they'll, all sort of pick up on different thematic elements that the other people aren't picking up on, which to me is the sign of an incredible movie, to sort of open up those sort of conversations and different readings and understandings of it. But also, I think we're also in agreement, or at least Sailor, I agree with you that the Deckard character isn't that strong. But I think he is sort of just a centralized figure that we can follow to get to know a lot of really, really interesting supporting characters. And I think like between Roy Batty, some of the other replicants, Rachel, even Tyrell, and what's the guy's name? Is it JF Sampson? Sebastian. Yeah, like all of those characters are super interesting. And like personally, I thought that they were all like really well fleshed out and all had opportunities to sort of shine in different scenes, and we get to know them in their lives in really cool ways. So I wanted to take us into that sort of conversation if you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, he just needed to be the grizzled old detective. That's all he needed to be. That's it. He's there to do that purpose. He's just going because it is about the other characters. I don't care about Deckard, in that way. I just kind of like, you're right. Like, I just want to follow him, do what he's got to do. He's got to do his job. Everything else around him gets to build and be cool, and that's the important part. He's there. He does his job. Like, he just wants to go home and have a drink at night. Like, that's all he wants to do.
Deckard needs to be human.
Yeah,
because he's the mirror. I think for us, you're right. He's the way that we experience the movie, and I think that's why he needs to be human. I think the question of him potentially being a replicant is, I think it's an interesting question to ask. In fact, I think I'm stealing this line from the writer, one of the writers, Hampton Fancher. I think he said something like, "The question is interesting. The answer is stupid," something like that. But I think that's. Yeah, I agree with you, Alvarez. I think that's all he needed to be. He just needed to be a guy that we can see the movie through.
And you know what? They would ruin it if they decided to make a prequel and give you a whole backstory and, be like, hey, let's see Darth Vader as a kid. Let's see Deckard. No, I don't need that.
Coming to a theater near you.
Yeah.
Or a streaming service.
Yep.
A new mini series on Hulu or whatever.
Yeah. Well, aren't they doing a Prime show?
Prime. Prime. So
it's still in the future. So it's going to follow 2049, which is fine. Because it's like they would ruin it that way if they go and they make a prequel and try to give him that backstory. I'm like,
They'll probably still ruin it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's true too. But I like that he's just there. Like, I don't need to know much more about him. I don't really care. Like, it's just let him be himself. Boring or not, like he's there, and he's the impetus for the whole thing, you know.
In a movie that is like, again, like pretty hard to access, like having Harrison Ford, the biggest movie star in the world at the time, be your lead as someone who, again, is just like our vehicle to like latch on and go through the rest of this movie. Like that's the only purpose that he serves, you know, because if this movie doesn't have Harrison Ford, then this is something that like even fewer people will really be able to connect with. Like, wait, I'm just going to watch a movie about like a bunch of character actors trying to figure out if they're robots or not. Like that doesn't make sense. Like we need someone to take us on this journey. And like Harrison Ford is perfect for that. Sailor, I don't know if you like fully said this, but I don't think Harrison Ford is a great actor. He's like a very beautiful face and he's charismatic, and like you put him on screen and people are going to enjoy looking at him. So like I understand why he's in this movie. All that being said, I think this is probably his best role. Just because it's like the strongest movie that he's in that's not just like a cheesy George Lucas vehicle. But like that's really his whole purpose, right? He's just there, Alvarez, like you said, for us to just latch on and like get the rest of the story through him. And Dahl, like you said, like he kind of needs to be human in order for us to like connect with him in the way that we do, and connect with the movie and like understand the movie in the way that we need to. I'm under the impression that I'm like not interested in whether or not he's a replicant. I think there's so many other things in this movie that are way more fascinating that, you know, we can talk about that don't involve the question of whether or not Deckard is a replicant. But I don't know if you guys agree with that.
I don't even question it. He's not. It's just I don't care what Scott said. He's not. It just will never happen. It's never going to be in my mind. He's not. You know, because it makes zero sense, and that's why I think it was kind of weird that in 2049 you do have a replicant hunting replicants, like, but not really hunting replicants. It gets weird. Like, it was like he was trying to like take his original idea and force it into the new one, because I still think it would have been better that he wasn't. But at the same time, I'm like, all right, well, now it's kind of the opposite. But like,
but they don't. He at least Denis Villeneuve does not answer the fact whether or not Deckard is a replicant. I mean, Kay is his own character; he's his own thing, and he's a replicant.
Yep.
But it's amazing that he made a sequel and he does not definitively answer the question.
No,
and I'm like, how amazing is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was pretty good. It's like, just don't kind of ignore it. Just pretend it didn't happen. It's really, you know, like pretend he ever said it. Just let him do his thing. You know, he's there.
The movie is so great outside of that.
Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be a thing. Like the reveal, or you know, whatever you want to call it, of Deckard being a replicant doesn't enhance our understanding or our experience of watching this movie at all.
It takes away.
If anything, it annoys people.
Well, it takes away from Roy Batty's sacrifice at the end. Like, he has Deckard, he could kill Deckard, but he saves him because he recognizes that he is humanity. Like, he is the stand-in for humanity for the viewer. He is human, right. Or exactly. That ending just doesn't work, because he's like, why would I sacrifice? Like, it doesn't work if he is also a replicant. He has to be human, or that choice doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. And that choice is everything. That is Roy Batty, and that decision right there.
When he can also humanizes Roy Batty, which is kind of cool. Like, it's like
it makes him one of the most fleshed out third dimensional villains. Because I don't even see him as a villain. He is fighting to live.
Yeah,
but he's only a villain because we are seeing it through the eyes of Deckard. Because he is murdering people left and right, but. I mean, it's no different than a slave killing slave owners. Like, it's basically what he's doing. He's like, hey, Tyrell, you bitch, I'm going to kill you. And, I mean, you're rooting for him because Tyrell sucks. Look at his face.
Batty was Django before Django.
Well, I'm
Django Unchained is fully derivative of
Patty
Blade Runner.
Betty Unchained. Well, that's a movie. That's a movie right there.
The more obvious he makes it that Deckard is a replicant, the more he turns the whole movie into a really cheap Twilight Zone episode where it's like, gotcha at the end.
Yeah.
It was a planet full of replicants, guys.
No.
Humanity is robots.
It just needs one really obnoxious zoom out at the end of everyone left on Earth, and then a title card that says they were all replicants.
They are all replicants.
Yep. Spell it out.
Yeah.
Soylent Green is replicants. Wait, that doesn't work.
Tyler Durden was a replicant the entire time.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my god.
So was Bruce Willis.
Yes.
We've got to talk about this though. And this debate will go on and on no matter what, but this question was pretty well answered in a book that was written about the making of Blade Runner. And Sailor earlier said that Ridley Scott didn't understand his own movie, and I totally agree with him. As far as I can tell, and as far as anybody else can tell, where he got the idea that Deckard was a replicant was in a complete misunderstanding of a rewrite by the second writer, David Peoples, I think is his name. And he writes this little bit into the script where Harrison Ford, where Deckard is kind of ruminating, and he's thinking about, how different am I from Roy Batty? And really he's talking about God. He's talking about how God made him, and that there's really not a lot of difference. And David Peoples, I think, is trying to not just outright say Ridley Scott is a fool, because he says, I wrote this in an ambiguous way, and that's why when he saw this and read it, he thought, oh, he's a replicant. That's brilliant. That's genius. And he's like, anybody could have made that mistake. If you read the passage, man, it's pretty obvious that he's being, that he's making a reference to God. It's just, oh man, it's kind of embarrassing when you think about it, but Blade Runner ends up being sort of an accidental masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. It's just works regardless of, all of the potential, flaws and monkey wrenches that got thrown in along the way. It's just one of, I think, Hollywood's really happy accidents.
I also think there's so many other thematical elements sort of going on in this movie at the same time that it would be hard to just focus on the God creation sort of relationship element of it. There are just so many other things at play that there's just not enough room for it to go full God. And I guess that's probably credit to the screenplay and the script writing, that it doesn't really allow for just one theme to be hammered over the head. We get elements and interesting pieces of sort of all of them. I think we covered pretty much everything, at least that I wanted to cover. I don't know if you guys had any other thoughts or specifics that y'all wanted to talk about.
I could go on and on for hours, so no, I won't do that to you.
I like it. I like his gun.
Good gun.
It's a good gun.
I like his flying car.
I like his flying. Yeah.
No, that's the thing is there's so much to like about the movie that I think it outweighs the things that you could you'd kind of dislike. There's just you see it and you're like, oh my god, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. And then you're you kind of forget how you said style over substance, but you forget that there's little weird plot holes and little things that kind of don't make sense, but whatever. It's just that's what like you said. It's an accidental masterpiece. It really is. It's a better movie than most people give it credit for. And it's also kind of oh yeah, I can see why you want to go back and fix it, because you're you kind of realize you're you missed a couple of points, but as
I see. I see people's issues with the narrative. The pacing.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I mean, I can totally see all that stuff. I just think that it's one of those things that's just it's beautiful, warts and all, for me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I take the director's cut more than even say the final cut, because whatever. But like those are kind of almost one and the same to me, and I'm like, over the theatrical cut. Like, I think you should watch the theatrical cut just to see the difference. But like as a whole, I think the director's cut makes more sense. It loses that happy ending, it loses the narration, which isn't great. Like it's bad. It's just bad narration. Like it just doesn't need to be there. It doesn't, help. Like, but I think Sailor, you said it with Dark City. It was the same thing. Like they had the narration, they took it out of the director's cut, and I'm pretty sure there's a couple other movies that do the same thing. And you're like, it's weird. It's like, yeah, you kind of do it to move things along to keep people, like to kind of know what's going on. But 9 times out of 10, it doesn't need to be there, And
they need to trust the audience that we can follow it.
Exactly. And that is one of the things Hollywood needs to like realize. It's like, trust the audience. Like there's so many times it's just like something gets done and like 2 seconds later somebody's explaining it, and I'm like, I figured that out. Like I don't need 30 seconds of extra dialogue to explain something that was pretty much obvious. Sometimes things slip, but like 9 times out of 10, you're overwriting shit just to like, hand feed the audience, and you don't need it.
Yeah, this is a total digression, but this is happening really bad right now in season 3 of The Mandalorian. They've spent 2 seasons letting this main character just walk around and not say a lot, and that worked fine for us. Mm-hmm. And then now in season 3, he's just super chatty, and he just like telling the audience what he's doing. Well, I'm going to walk over here and test the atmosphere and make sure that I can take my helmet off, Baby Yoda. So,
but I can't take my helmet
off. And then I'll update you later. It's like, just trust us. We followed 2 seasons, Yeah. So that was a studio. I think that was a studio note with Blade Runner, and it was the right call to ditch it.
Yep.
I'm struggling with. I keep coming back to this phrase that we're using, style over substance, with this movie, because while I think we've hammered this point home that the plot and the narrative are definitely not the strongest point of the movie, but I think that narrative doesn't necessarily equate to the substance of something. I think that this movie has an incredible amount of substance, like way more substance than like 90% of movies that have ever been made. But I'm just like trying to think of like another phrase that we can use.
Well, it's not style over.
But
the style is the substance.
Yes.
And I think that like
Guillermo del Toro has this phrase, eye protein, instead of eye candy, which is just empty calories and it's pretty and you look at it. Eye protein nourishes your eyes, your palate, and I think that there's no better example of what he's talking about when he mentions eye protein. He's usually talking about his own movies, but Blade Runner is eye protein. The style is the substance.
Yeah.
You cannot divorce it. It would be like saying, would Harryhausen movies be as good without Harryhausen effects? It's like impossible to divorce it from. I mean, like, yeah, is Clash of the Titans, what does it hold up in terms of a narrative? No, not really. It's episodic, and you're really going from plot points to or plot beats to plot beats. But so you're really watching it for the Harryhausen effects. So to say that this movie would exist without those effects, it's like, no, but that's an impossible thing to say anyways. It's the effects make the movie, but the movie also works because he can ladle on all of the style. Like, he's drowning this movie in style, visual style, and it never feels like, I get it. Like, It's not overproduced. It's not over visualized. It's not, the sets aren't like gaudy. There are 80s movies from this period where you're like, I get it. Tone it. Like Michael Mann, especially, where you're like, I get it, man. The 80s. I get it.
I'm with Raph. I'm with you, Raph. Raph, are you alluding to like the subtext to the film, the themes that are there despite Ridley Scott's insistence that Deckard's a replicant?
Yeah. I just think for me personally, I think we as movie audiences have sort of been told by Hollywood that narrative is like the most important thing when you go see a movie, but like really these are pieces of art that include so many different varieties of art, and like writing is just one of them. Like set design, cinematography, lighting,
music.
acting, music, all of these things, editing are, themselves like really spectacular art forms. And if a movie is able to succeed in all of those and maybe doesn't necessarily succeed on the narrative front, like that is still something that should be celebrated. And this movie knocks it out of the ballpark in all of those other elements and art forms that like, and like the narrative is like, it's okay. It's not like bad. But like, not to get like too deep into the conversation, but then when a movie has like an interesting narrative or an interesting plot, but like I can't fucking see anything because no one knows how to light a set. Like is that a good movie? Or like the editing is janky and like totally takes me out of whatever story I'm supposed to be following. Like, is that a good movie? To me, no. But something like Blade Runner that is like really engaging with people in all of those audio visual aspects that movies are supposed to be, then like that is a great movie. That's where I stand on something like Blade Runner. Yeah.
I like movies that make you think too. I mean, I think one of the big reasons why Blade Runner has stuck with me over the years is just coming back to some of these questions. I just a few nights ago watched The Banshees of Inisherin, and you get to the end of that movie and you're just like, whoa, okay, I got to think about that. And I'm still thinking about it. And I'm going to be thinking about it next week and probably next month and probably next year. And, you can't do that with every single movie, but, some people don't know how to do that. Some people just, fake doing that by just not writing in, elements of the story that have to be there. That reminds me of J.J. Abrams writing. I'm going to pretend to be really literary and smart, but really I just don't have any plan at all. Yeah, I don't know. I like that the movie doesn't ladle everything to you, and that's why it bothers me so much when I see Ridley Scott going on these rants about how he's a replicant. That's fine. Like, you think he is and other people do. Yes, that's great. That's you. That's how you see the movie. That's fine. Just don't ruin it for the rest of us that want to think about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with thinking. I think that's those are words of wisdom that we can all live by.
I mean, kind of do is like you said this. You don't want to say style over substance, because you're right. The substance is there, and there's a good amount of it. And then there's just so much more of that style on top of it that it kind of does outweigh it to that point where you're like, you say it and it's like, but yeah, there's a lot going on in that movie, and it's weird because it happens and you want to think about it, and like how Dahl just said it, like I like movies that make me think, and you think about that movie a lot, like in many different ways. I think about the score more often than I do about certain other things sometimes, just because I'm like, that music is outstanding. I love good movie score, and like, I don't think about the plot so much, or I don't think about like Deckard's backstory. I just think about like what he's doing, but then I think about like everything that's happening. I was like, if I'm thinking about a part of the movie, I'm thinking about like how it looked and how it sounded and and yeah, he's there, like he's a guy. That's great, because I'm just thinking about me kind of being in there instead of him. Like if you made him a little bit more over the top or a little bit more stylized or a little bit more like it would deter from everything else around him. So you needed that like happy medium right there.
That's beautiful stuff. So for the listener's sake, I think on this show we're going to try to avoid grading movies. We want to avoid things like rankings and stuff like that. We just want to, we had a great discussion about why Blade Runner is awesome, and we're just going to leave it at that. Before we jump into sort of our final portions of the show, because the sequel exists and everyone has thoughts on it, let's just go 30 seconds. Everyone give me your thoughts on Blade Runner 2049. I know 30 seconds is not realistic, but Sailor, kick it off.
The plot is better. The acting is better. Characters aren't as good. The score isn't as good. And the visuals are almost as good. I think it's a miracle that it works half as good as it does. And I think it works like a fucking charm. So, Denis Villeneuve, you've earned the 3 Dune movies you're making based on the strength of this movie alone.
Dahl, you got anything on 2049?
I don't like it as much as I like Blade Runner. And it pains me to say that because I'm a big fan of the director. I don't think I've disliked anything that he's made. I don't think it's as visually strong. I like that he didn't just try to rip off or just play on the strengths of the visual look of the original, but I don't know. Somehow they seem oddly disconnected in a way that's jarring to me. I really like the film. I don't love it as much, and I can't quite pinpoint why. I'm really glad it exists, and I'm really glad that Villeneuve handled it, because I think that if we'd had a director that wasn't as strong,
like J.J. Abrams,
yes, sir, we would have gotten some just absolute trash.
We would have just gotten a lot of lens flare for no reason.
A lot of lens flare, and I mean, I've read a few of these graphic novels that have come out since 2049, and it's just like they're just repeats of the original movie, and that is so boring. So I'm really glad that 2049 is not that. I'll leave it at that.
Alvarez, what do you have on 2049?
I like 2049. I think it's a good movie. It's a great follow-up. I don't hate the score as much as Sailor seems to. I think it's a very different score. That's the one thing. But like, I think it's a good follow-up. It takes it in its own direction. It at least world builds in a different way than most legacy sequels or whatever you want to call them these days. Like, for being that far off, from 82 to whatever year that came out, 20 some odd years later, you're like, oh, did we really need, a sequel? It worked, and it didn't like harken back to the original, like in crazy weird ways and be like, hey, check this out. And like, look at this, like some of the Star Wars, new movies that, it's like, it's a better made sequel. And it's a better sequel than it had any right to be.
And to be clear, I have no problems with Hans Zimmer's score. He's just no Vangelis. Let's just be very clear.
That's true. I will not argue that fact. I like some of your scores, but his scores have also gotten very repetitive these days.
I like how weird it is. I'm glad they didn't try to just rip off Vangelis' score. I think that would have been a complete nightmare. So they were smart to kind of go their own way.
It's fantastic. It's a hell of a score, but it ain't no Vangelis. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed.
But I do think it looks as good. I don't want to say better, but Roger Deakins. That's the one thing that the original doesn't have is Roger Deakins, and that is an invaluable asset to any movie. He's gonna make your movie look better than it should. And Blade Runner 2049 looks fucking fantastic. Every frame of that movie is damn near a painting.
Gentlemen, I think you guys all knocked it out of the park. And I think we were pretty close to 30 seconds. So cheers to that. But yeah, I don't really have anything to add on top of what you guys said for 2049. Something that just popped into my head, which I think I now want to do on every episode. I want everyone to go around and name an MVP, whether it be a performance, someone, behind the camera, behind the scenes, just who you think is the MVP of this movie. And we'll go in the same order. So Sailor, you can kick us off.
Well, it's Rutger Hauer. As good looking as this movie is, and the score, and Ridley Scott, it's Rutger Hauer is the glue that makes this thing work. He is the heart and soul, literally the heart and soul of the story. Without his performance, I don't think it would be as good. You're talking about style over substance, or style instead of substance, or all the themes that we're talking about, all the story. Basically, what we're talking about is the story good enough? None of that shit matters because Rutger Hauer is the story, and his story is great. So Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty is my MVP.
I dig it. Good answer. Dahl, who do you have?
I probably am inclined to agree with Sailor. I mean, for him coming up with that soliloquy alone, but I'm just for the sake of being interesting. I'll say Hampton Fancher, the original writer on this. He got the rights. He pursued writing the story, adapting this. I think he cut a lot of the crap out of Dick's novel that made it really boring and uninteresting. And I think he was also responsible for the bulk of the substance that we were talking about. I mean, he had a really interesting story in mind. He wasn't interested in writing a gotcha Twilight Zone ending. And if it weren't for him, I don't think this movie would exist at all.
Nice. I mean, movies typically start with screenwriters, so I feel like that's a fair shout for MVP. Alvarez, who do you have?
I'm just gonna go Evangelist then, since we're just talking about different aspects and because there's so much stuff that you can pick that is great about it. It's the score, like it gives you this flow throughout the whole movie that is different than any other movie you had heard at that time and since, really. So yeah, just Evangelist winner.
Rad. I love it. 3 great answers. I'm gonna throw in a bit of a curveball. My MVP, I'm going with JF Sebastian's Toys, because those guys are hysterical, especially the dude who always runs into the door frame. That gives me a good chuckle every time. So, not as important as the main antagonist or the original screenwriter or the composer, but still a crucial part of the movie, I would say. Gentlemen, this has been an absolutely incredible discussion. I appreciate you all for joining me to talk about this wonderful film. Now, for the moment that everyone's been waiting for, I think we're going to give 3 recommendations sort of related to, in the same sort of vein, or in a way like spiritually connected to this movie. I hope you guys all took time to do your homework and give us 3 good picks. I think we'll go. Let's just do 1 each, and then we'll just go around the horn, giving 1. You can give a brief sort of reasoning behind why you're recommending this particular thing, and then we'll do that until the end. Alvarez, do you want to start us off?
Oh, I'm gonna go with something a little. I guess I don't want to say controversial, but some might think it is. But I was gonna go with Duncan Jones's Mute, which I kind of talked about before we got started. I was like, it is another noir science fiction film. It looks like it belongs in the Blade Runner world. I know that it got kind of panned when it first came out, but I didn't think it was nearly as bad as a lot of people said it was, and it felt like a good side world story to the Blade Runner world.
I'm going to jump in and say Paul Rudd and Justin Theroux are the reasons to watch that movie.
Yes.
Sailor, do you want to give us a rec next?
Oh, I knew you were going to come to me next. All right. It's going to make no sense.
Of course.
Well, I'm teeing into a very specific thing about Blade Runner, and we talked about it over and over again, and that's style over substance or whatever. But what that basically means is the world that Ridley Scott created. And it's a breathable world. It's a tactile world. If you want that same experience again, you're not going to find it in another cyberpunk movie because all of those movies are just taken from Blade Runner. So if you want to feel like you've been plopped down into a unique world that you've never seen before, like Ridley Scott did, there are few examples that are better than Robert Altman's Popeye. I know it's wild. It's a weird choice, but both are critical and commercial failures that both then became cult classics, then became just flat out classics. Like no one ever talks about the fact that this was a failure. We didn't even touch on it, but this was a box office bomb. But eventually, it's now considered one of the best movies of all time. Popeye isn't at that status yet, but it went through the exact same critical drubbing, commercial drubbing. Like no one went to see this movie, and it tanked the studio. And Robert Altman had to scrimp and save and do whatever he had to do to make the rest of his career happen. But Popeye, Sweet Haven, you cannot argue whether or not that is a world on par with what Blade Runner's doing. Mm-hmm. Like every single character doing all of their little character bits. Fascinating. And it also has a villain as good as Roy Batty in Bluto. Paul L. Smith is so good as Bluto. I'm just saying, if you want that same experience again, which is being transported into another world, Popeye.
Nice. Definitely took us in a direction I wasn't expecting, but we dig it. That's why we love you, Sailor. Dahl, what do you got?
Yeah, my recommendation is for similar reasons. A little movie called Code 46 with Tim Robbins and what's her name? Samantha Morton. Kind of a weird dystopian love story. One of the things I really like about this movie is the substance, or is the style. So there is substance for sure. I like that it does something similar that Blade Runner does, but in a really different way. This movie did not have a budget, and yet it feels set in the future. This was shot on in real locations, real sets. I wouldn't say that there's anything really that sci-fi futuristic about it, but just the way they build the world out makes it feel really alienating and strange, but in really interesting ways. And the story's a little odd. And I think you get to the end and it's a little disconcerting, but that can be a good thing sometimes. I don't think this movie got watched very much. And I'm not saying it's a great film, but it's interesting and it's visually interesting, and it's done in a way that I mean, this is my argument for more sci-fi films. I'd like to see budget constraints because I think it produces interesting things like this. So Code 46.
If you're a fan of the way features depicted in the movie Her, Code 46. They're very similar.
Nice. Well,
and it's on Tubi. If you want to see Code 46, it's on Tubi.
I do really appreciate your guys' first round. I'm enjoying the vibe that you guys are going with. For my first rec, it's going to be something pretty basic compared to what you guys are recommending. Sailor, this is a movie that you brought up earlier in the episode. but it's a sci-fi classic. So many things are pulling from Metropolis. I think Blade Runner is also pulling from Metropolis. It is, again, like Sailor, like you said, it's a tough movie to get through. It's pretty long for a silent movie. I want to say it's like close to 2 hours. But you watch that movie and you just understand like so much of where like the movies that you love, like where they're pulling from. I just think it's like a super important movie, sci-fi movie, for people to watch. So that's my first one. But yeah, let's whip through round 2.
Is it back to me?
Yep.
My next one, I actually kind of mentioned it before too, is THX 1138. The dystopian future, like just minimal. And it's another one that I was like, you watch the original, and it's very tight, and like he made some tweaks and kind of overdid it in parts. But one thing that he definitely Lucas improved on, was the creatures at the very end. But that movie is just got such like visual, like awesomeness going on. It's got the substance, but it's I don't want to say it's subtle, but it's like you really have to read into it. If you're not like thinking about it and you're just kind of watching it, you think there's none. I think that's kind of like what we were saying with even with Blade Runner. It's just like it's there, but if you're not really thinking about the movie and just kind of watching it, you're gonna think there's none. So it's like once you kind of start thinking about things that are going on in the movie, it sucks you in more, and it's one of those things that might pop up in your brain later. And I think THX does the same thing.
I've never seen it. It's another thing for me to add to the watch list.
One of Lucas's best.
Sailor, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is Blade Runner. I'm recommending the 1997 video game Blade Runner, which was a point-and-click game, which feels like the closest we were ever going to get to a sequel. And it's a side quill, as they kind of call it, because it's running parallel to the events of that movie, and you run into characters from that. Never Deckard though. You'll run into, was it Graf? You'll run into other Blade Runners, but basically what it is you're playing this Blade Runner named Ray McCoy, and you're investigating this vicious case of animal murder by a replicant. You're like, why the hell are they killing? Why are they killing this animal? That they're not programmed to do this. So, and it sends you down this, as all film noir stories do, it sends you down this rabbit hole, and a lot of clicking and reading. But if you're into clicking and reading, Blade Runner 1997. Fantastic.
Nice.
I mean, I could have gone with a more, Disco Elysium just came out, which was also a point-and-click adventure that's kind of cyberpunky, or Cyberpunk 2097, whatever the hell that one's called. But Blade Runner, I'm keeping on brand. It's a damn good movie, or damn good game based on the movie, and it's out there if you want to find it. I think they just remastered it. So, Blade Runner.
Sweet. That's awesome. Dhaal.
Stalker. Andrei Tarkovsky.
Oh.
It is a sci-fi. It's not obvious that it's a sci-fi when you watch it. This movie bores Sailor to tears. It bores Sailor so much that he mailed the Criterion Collection to me, and I was able to pass along my cheap DVD version that I had. But I love this movie. It's not obvious what this movie is trying to say, and it's another, like, this is a reason why I love this movie, because I think about this movie all the time. If you like the aspect of Blade Runner where these are the people that are living among the detritus that's left over, that's a parallel in Stalker. Stalker's just not, it's not obviously, it doesn't have all the trappings of a sci-fi, the way we think of it. and it's what is it? It's based on Roadside Picnic by the I can't remember two Russian brothers that are writers, Strugatsky or something like that. Anyway, really interesting movie, really long. But if you don't like movies that are slowly paced, you will probably hate Stalker.
Stalker is awesome. That's a great recommend. Also, another movie in our canon, so there will probably be an episode on that sometime in the future. I should have made a rule that none of the recommendations can be other movies in the canon, but we'll give it a pass for this go around. Okay, for my second recommendation, I'm gonna do a really easy connection point, and I'm just gonna recommend another Ridley Scott movie that I think is rad, and I don't think enough people saw it. I think maybe most of us are in agreement that Ridley Scott is pretty hit or miss, especially like into the 21st century. He's like very hit or miss. But I think The Last Duel was a hit, and I think it's mostly because of what Ben Affleck and Matt Damon were able to do with the script. I think the script is like really pushing the movie there, and Ridley Scott is just like someone who knows how to film like medieval battles, so that's why they brought him in, and he's not really doing much else. Sort of similar to what we've discussed with Blade Runner, like he's not necessarily the main strong contributor to what makes the movie great. He sort of just like happened upon it. If anything, he like might be taking away. So The Last Duel is, to me, kind of in a similar vein.
I like that pick. That's a good one. I liked that movie. I did. It was one of those movies that after you got done, I thought about it way more than I thought I was going to. And I heard so many bad things about it going into it that I was like, people are crazy. This movie's really fucking good, because like, I don't know which version, like whose story's right. That like at the end, I'm like, this is all bullshit. Like it was like one of those things where I was like, I dug it. So that's a fantastic pick.
Yeah, agree.
Thanks, guys. Just to let you know, flattery will not guarantee you another episode. But yeah, let's rip through round 3 of recommendations.
I think I'm blanking on what my round 3 was, or I never came up with one. But I think that's what it was. It was like, oh, I got to come up with a third one, and I never did. But if I just kind of keep with sci-fi things, and it doesn't really tie into Blade Runner at all, but like 12 Monkeys, like that's just another one. It's like, it's visual. There is substance. The visual kind of outweighs the substance, but there's still a ton of substance in it. And it's like, it's hard to kind of pick and choose, but like there's a lot going on in that movie. And I think it's Gilliam's best, to be completely honest. I mean, like, I know people love Brazil, and I probably need to go back and revisit that one of these days. But 12 Monkeys is just a rad movie, and great score, and like everything about it. Again, it's like all the same kind of pieces, So yeah, there you go.
Bruce Willis's best performance.
It might be.
I'm gonna say
I've never seen it.
Oh,
you guys are giving me a lot of cool things.
Watch it and the movie it's based on, La Jetée. Ooh, La Jetée is so good. It's like 45 minutes.
It's like 30 minutes long, and it's on YouTube, I think.
It's so good.
Sweet, yeah. Well, once we give all these, we'll run through the list again. But I'm gonna listen back and add some stuff to my watch list. But Sailor, what's your final rec?
Well, in addition to the unofficial Blade Runner 1997 and Blade Runner 2049 and the anime Black Lotus, there is another movie set in the Blade Runner universe. Pop quiz. What is it?
Universal Soldier.
You're so close,
Oh,
Alvarez.
wait. Shit, what is it then?
Cut one word off that title and you got it.
Just Soldier.
Just Soldier with Kurt
That's
Russell.
Right.
Is it good? It's directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, and it's one of his better movies. Let's just put it that way.
Written by David Peoples.
It's got action. It's got Kurt Russell. That's it.
You know what? That's enough for me, man.
I know if that's not going to sell you on it. Jason Scott Lee. I got my hands up in the air, y'all. It's Kurt Russell. He's kind of like in Old Man Logan mode where he has to protect his family from other replicants because he's gone off because they're trying to replace him because he's old. I'm like, we got newer models. You suck. You're old, Kurt Russell. And he's like, I'm Kurt Russell. And he fights everybody. I don't want to say it's great, but it's more entertaining than you would expect a movie directed by Paul W.S. Anderson to be.
I might have to rewatch that one. Oh no, actually.
Okay, I'll add it to the list. I got a lot of homework to do.
It's no La Jetée or 12 Monkeys, but
yeah, maybe that'll be like a background movie, not necessarily something I'm fully invested in.
The enjoyment you will get out of it is solely dependent on how much you love Kurt Russell.
I mean, Kurt Russell is great. He's
it's better than most.
He's a handsome man.
That is this is him at his most ripped. He's in shape in this fucking thing. He's a credible action lead in a time when everyone looked like Clint Eastwood, which is to say, my father.
I think you should have gone. Everyone looks like my father, which is to say, Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood.
There you
go. Dahl, what's your final rec?
I'm going to recommend an author, William Gibson. He wrote Neuromancer.
I knew you were. I knew it.
He wrote Neuromancer. William Gibson has famously said that he was writing Neuromancer when Blade Runner came out. He went to the movies, saw Blade Runner, and said, "Oh, I'm finished," because Blade Runner is basically what he was picturing when he wrote Neuromancer. Now you can read Neuromancer, you can read the trilogy, but I think it's, everybody wants to see that thing get adapted, and I think it's too late for that. I think the ideas in it are, we've got the internet now, and I think it would come across as kind of hokey. But he's got a series that came out maybe about a decade and a half ago, something like that. I think it's called the Blue Ant trilogy. One is Pattern Recognition. One is Zero History. I can't remember what the other one is, but they're a little more modern. They're not cyberpunk in the sense that they're dressed up with all the cyberpunk trappings, but I think they're really interesting books. Pattern Recognition is really difficult to get into. I think it's a little bit plodding, but the other two are pretty interesting. This guy has an uncanny ability to pick out little niche interests and make them parts of his stories, and it's a really interesting trilogy. So yeah, I would say go read some William Gibson.
Nice. I'm glad we got some literature into the mix. All right, my final rec. I'm gonna go with an album. I think it's kind of it's sort of cyberpunky vibes. It's a band I really dig. The opening track, I was actually listening to it today because I was thinking about recommending it, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to. But the opening track has a line that says, "What do you mean you've never seen Blade Runner?" So I just had to throw it in. It's Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino by the Arctic Monkeys. I don't know if you guys listen to them at all, but they're one of my favorite bands, and it's a super cool album. It pairs well with something like Blade Runner, and they explicitly ask the question to folks who haven't seen it, "What do you mean you haven't seen Blade Runner?" So that's my last rec.
Right on.
Dudes, good stuff. This has been a ton of fun. Thank you guys for joining me and for giving me so much of your time. But this was an awesome conversation. I hope you guys had as much fun as I did. Any parting words? Anything?
Well, do you want us to run down our recommendations for people
Yeah, let's do a quick rundown.
Yeah.
We'll go same order and we'll do a quick
Because when
rundown.
I'm listening to podcasts and they don't, I'm like, God damn it, I don't want to rewind to fucking.
Yeah, where's the recap?
Yeah,
good
give me
shout.
that recap.
Yeah, let's go same order.
Okay, so I said Duncan Jones's Mute, George Lucas's THX 1138, and Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys.
And I went with Blade Runner, the video game from 1997, Popeye, the movie from 1980, and Soldier from 1998.
Code 46, Stalker, both of them films, and pretty much anything by William Gibson.
I've got Metropolis. I almost read the wrong recommendation. I had a fourth one that I was going to keep in my back pocket. I've got Metropolis, I've got The Last Duel, and I've got the album Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino by the Arctic Monkeys. So
well, you better give us
your
that fourth recommendation. What is it?
I thought that one of you guys would maybe come up with Metropolis or this one. It's Ex Machina.
Yes.
Sort of similar, sort of like what does it mean to be human versus machine sort of vibe. So, the whole God creation relationship thing going on there. So, that was my fourth.
Nice.
Just wanted to keep it in the back pocket.
That's a good pick.
But yeah, there you have it. That's Blade Runner. We got MVPs. We got recommendations. We got a healthy discussion about the movie. Again, thank you guys for taking the time to talk about it. I hope you all had as much fun as I did. This has really been a blast. If you guys have any, for parting words, if you have anything, any articles or whatever that are coming up on the website that you want folks to be on the lookout for, shout them out now. But otherwise, we can call it quits.
I have a few parting words, just very quickly. Daryl Hannah, I think, is someone to watch in the film, and it's sad we didn't talk about her, but I think she puts on a really great performance in the movie. So I would say watch out for her performance in the movie. That's my parting shots.
I just want to thank you, Raph, for putting this all together. I think this is pretty awesome. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
Go see Popeye. It's really good, y'all. It's really good.
Not wrong, though.
It's really good.
Thank you guys again for joining. Listener, thank you for listening. Our next episode is actually out today. To kick things off, we're doing a special 2-for-1. So you got another episode today. Be sure to check out Screen Age Wasteland. There's a ton of cool stuff going on there. We hope to see you there in the comment section, talking about movies with us. And yeah, until the next time, I don't have a good sign off yet. So goodbye.